Most FileMaker developers have been using AI for at least light help. Development tasks, writing calculations, getting data model ideas, fixing JSON code. But really, not many have been using AI to integrate for production databases for the benefit of our users, for our clients. I'm here today to talk with Charles Delfs of Delft Engineering, the maker of fmBetterForms, about a list of architectural techniques, some methods, and some use cases that clarify and help this situation. Charles has a list of ideas from easy to medium to hard. We'll look at some of them. Charles, welcome.
Hey, Matt, thank you very much for having me on the show. This is, I listen to you guys all the time. I'm a big fan, and I'm happy to share some of my thoughts today as well. So this is gonna be great. Looking forward to it.
What I really loved is that some of the stuff you showed me wasn't necessarily just about better forms. And I think actually the great story there, is better forms is much closer to like the native internet, if you will, and actually is more of a coding environment. And so you can actually do a lot more with AI than you can with the tools of FileMaker, even though the new tools of FileMaker in 2025 are very accessible. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Have you've been using AI
So
a lot more than most?
yeah. We've been all in on AI for the past almost well 3+ years, right? Really, the big turning point was when GPT-3 came out. That was when we started to seriously look and say, okay, we need to jump on this. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's been a real challenge in the sense of not in terms of technology, but things change all the time. We can
Hmm.
talk about that in a little bit more detail. And we started to say, well, where can we use AI, and how can we use it ourselves for our product? And we sort of did things backwards. We're very heavy in the technology. We have 75-ish% of our team are on the technical side, with the rest being admin. So we didn't use as much until the past about a year or so, as much AI in the front end, or sorry, in the front end on the admin side of things,
Hmm.
but really heavily into their R&D side.
So running the business, you mean, like using it on
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So we said, well, how can we use GPT? Well, one of the first ways is code generation. We can generate code, and this is becoming more and more a doable thing. You see this a lot more with the YouTubers if you follow
Hmm.
all of them, and there's a lot more than what they're showing in the sense of um, issues. But nonetheless, code generation was one of them. And we also use it for FileMaker as well for generating, not generating, but for back then at least for evaluation of code and for
Hmm.
understanding of code as well. So that's a big one. What I wanted to talk about is just maybe we could kind of riff on some of the ways that some really low-hanging fruit that the citizen FileMaker developer could go and get some quick wins
Yeah, like it.
and quick wins. Yeah. So one of them, I think, is, as I just mentioned, is code comprehension,
Hmm.
right? Basically taking a script and copying that script into, say, GPT or Gemini or Claude, if you one of those people,
Hmm.
and you can tell which camp I'm in, and uh, and using that for code comprehension. And we found that's been really good. We generally don't write our scripts that so they're mega complex, but they do sometimes have lots of, like everybody, lots of complex business logic embedded within them.
Hmm.
So I think majority of our users in FileMaker, well, not probably the majority, have Monkey Bread, the Monkey Bread plugin.
Yes, I was just actually going to make a huge plug for this. Let me go ahead and do it. In the latest version of the MBS plugin, even if you have the free version, if you go into a script and you copy part of it or all of it just to the clipboard, you may or may not know that that's actually just a bunch of XML code in FileMaker. You can now just paste that directly into something like ChatGPT, and all of it comes in as text, as XML, and then GPT can actually read it, change it, understand it, analyze it, and you can even ask for things like changes to it, like add another loop that does blah, and then it can put XML back on the clipboard that you can then go into FileMaker Script Workspace and paste into a script. I have had limited success on that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. but it's amazing that it can work, and I think it's only going to be, whatever issues are causing it to not work. That's a phenomenal, huge game changer, I think,
Absolutely.
because you couldn't
And
do that before. Anyway,
yeah,
continue.
you just told me about that, and I didn't know that Christian had added that into the plugin. So high five for that.
Big
That
time.
was something that we could do before. We have to use a plugin like MBS or base elements and
Yeah.
to convert the
There was
XML and
steps,
to grab
yeah, to
that.
go. Yeah, now it's just basically
So,
straight up copy and paste.
and
Yeah.
one of the nice things I've been using just the copy text button. There's a copy text
Hmm.
button at the top of the MBS plugin, and but that doesn't grab all
Doesn't
of the
grab.
deep functions. It
Yeah, that's
misses a
right.
little bit,
A
right? So
lot,
you have to
actually. If you have a set variable script step with like a function in it, it doesn't get that at all. It only gets like the first part of it that's visible on the script. But the new
exactly.
function actually gets the whole entire thing, all of
Yeah,
it.
which is great. So that's something that's an immediate win, and you can use that with the free plugin
Yep.
as well. And
Of course,
there's so
don't. You
many.
should buy it, but anyway.
Yeah, well, as I was just gonna say, there's
Yeah.
so many features and functionality that you're almost trapped you're bound by not having it.
Yep.
So that's a really big one, and I think we spend so much of our time reading code, right? Than writing code. Like I'm not that great of a programmer that I can just write code and never look at it again. I'm always parsing it and going through there. So that was one of the biggest low-hanging fruit that we could do even before GPTs really had a good understanding of FileMaker. It's gotten a lot better. And you can tell every version of FileMaker, or sorry, every version of I'm using ChatGPT as
Hmm.
versions, say from 3 to 3.5,
Hmm.
4 and 5. You can tell the difference in the ability for it to understand. But one of the nice things is you can have a language that doesn't even exist as long as it has syntactic structure and logical structure.
Hmm.
You can paste it into a GPT and it'll understand the language, which is kind of a weird thing to think about, but it'll kind of infer a lot of the concepts of language. So it fills in a lot of the blanks, and they're not really hallucinations. They're assumptions, I would call them.
Hmm.
Another really low-hanging fruit. Maybe we'll keep
Oh,
going
I'll
on
look at your
like
list, actually.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Here,
You
let
got a
me share.
lot.
I'll
Yeah,
share my
there's a
list here.
lot
I'll
of
share my
them.
list. These are just some things that came to mind here. I'll make them a little bit bigger here. So another we're going to jump a little bit here
Hmm.
is code diffing, right?
Hmm.
We have two scripts. Something changed. I'm not sure how I buggered it up somehow. Oops. And I want to understand that. So maybe I've duplicated my script before I started to edit it,
Hmm.
and then I copy that script and say, "Hey, what's the difference between these? Why are these breaking? Why is this thing not working or doing that thing?"
Hmm.
And right away, you have this amazing pair coding partner that is quite adept at seeing those little minutia
Hmm.
of the changes. Here's one that's kind of cool. This doesn't work for every scenario, and I'll tell you how you can work around that. But you can take a
DDR.
DDR as XML or HTML, but the
Hmm.
XML one, and you can paste that into GPT as a document.
Like
Okay,
a custom
pasting it,
GPT, or actually just a regular old
just
GPT that
just
just
chat
added in. Yeah,
GPT,
yeah. Hmm.
literally paste it in,
Hmm.
and from there you can ask questions against your DDR.
Hmm.
So now you have, we have products for this, right? The three products are the main ones, but you can actually
Hmm.
have inferences off of that DDR. Right now, this doesn't work with big ones. I can't do it with one of our main code bases because it's too big. But there are some workarounds. I think it's Mislav from Soliant has done some work on splitting this up, splitting the XML up
Hmm.
into logical sections. Take those, add them in, put them in as docs. Say to GPT, this doc is these collection of 5 documents are from my DDR. There's a little bit
Hmm.
of work, but you could automate this if you wanted to. I'm just showing ways of thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I would actually do an add-on to this. You can make a custom GPT. We'll just kind of keep using that ChatGPT as an
Hmm.
example, even though some people are following different religions, obviously. So if you make a custom GPT, you can make one for a particular client project, and then you can have that client's DDR. You can have that client's PDFs for their spec. You could have some, you could put in some fake data or any other information about that client's particular needs, and then you have a GPT for that client that you can also then share with the team, right? Because custom GPTs can be shared
Right.
privately.
That's interesting. The sharing with the team is a big one, in the sense of even coding rules. and you can do an
Yeah.
evaluation. So you can say, hey, does this script have a doc block at the top? Does it say what the purpose is, who the author is, what are the last changes? And when you do make changes, grab it, pop it in, take it out again from GPT, and you've just updated your document block with a really detailed doc summary. Or in
Hmm.
return, you can just put that in a separate doc if you wanted as well. So there's a lot for change logging and diff checking and change logging that you
Hmm.
can do
Hmm.
right out of the box there. Super, super simple.
Yeah, so I mean, we're talking about a lot of things that are sort of, I say there's really sort of two groups, right? Developer facing things, things that make our lives as developers easy, to make us more efficient, give us abilities we didn't have before. Um, and then there's the client facing ones, right? Which we're going to get to, I think, in a little bit. Um, but I think there's still a ton of things that just as developers we could be using that we haven't necessarily thought of.
So one of the things that we do quite a bit now, and we do this more in the past half a year than I did in the first 2.5 years, is I use GPT for writing documentation
Mm-hmm.
on my stuff. So no, I'm using Notion right now, and Notion has just added some agentic workflows, which are pretty impressive. They've done a great job. They've given the agent 100% feature parity as to an actual user. So that means it can check boxes like these check boxes. It can do all kinds of things
Mm-hmm.
here. And if you've used any of the code generating tools, for example, VS Code, Windsurf, Cursor is the one I use.
Mm-hmm.
If you use this look and feel will be very, very familiar. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I think they just
Mm-hmm.
kind of copied it. But the idea here is that I have a chat window and I could, say something like organize all of these notes and it'll re-summarize them and
Mm-hmm.
put them into categories and such. What I've been doing now is I've been taking things like we'll stick with FileMaker for a bit. Is I've been taking things like a script and I say, okay, I got these set of three scripts. And when we design our code, we usually build code or program in architectural layers. So at the very bottom layer, I'll have some kind of communication or API connector layer. On top of that, we'll have the one that is more specific to say connects to MailChimp, and then you can have another one, Mailgun, and email Joe, and all these different software sitting
Mm-hmm.
on top of that. And then on top of that, we'll have another script that says send the invoice. So we'll have these three different layers. And what I'll do is I'll take all three of those scripts, copy and paste them into GPT and say, write me up a quick doc and a quick explanation of this because I want to assign a task to one of my junior team and they can just run with that now. They have a clear example of and breakdown of everything there. So that's been really, really useful for writing docs. And again, I mentioned earlier the doc block. The doc block, in case you don't know, is the documentation that we have sitting at the top of the script for people who don't bother
Oh yeah, yeah,
documenting.
definitely. I always haven't actually used that term for it, but that's a really good idea. I call it like a template where you have like, what's the script do? Who wrote it? When did they write it? What is it? What's coming in? What's going out? What calls it? What, is it called by a script? Is it called by a layout? Stuff like that. And I think what you're saying is, considerably more information about what it does. Hey,
Here's
by the
another
way,
one.
speaking of your juniors, thank you very much for sending your new employees to my training classes.
Absolutely.
I
You
want
know
to I
what?
want to say
I
that up
just wanted to mention
publicly.
that as well. We've we're located in Canada, and we have about eight on the engineering side or so. And I think almost all of them at some point have gone to one of your courses. They all come from a computer science background, some type of computer science related
Hmm.
background. Most of our hires, and but they don't know anything. They don't know anything about FileMaker, and that really gives them the foundation to run and get the core concepts.
Hmm.
They understand what tables are. They've done work and things like that in school, um, but that's really been helpful, and that also helps us as well because now we can work with these different government programs. And there's this is not the exact wording of it, but it's basically give a student a job type programs,
Hmm.
and we take advantage of that quite a bit. So that's why most of our team has, or that's the path, the journey that most of our team have taken.
Yeah, and I've actually been working with Claris also on the Apple Developer Academy. to have the teachers from those programs come through my training. A lot of them just came through, and also students, like some of their star students coming through on my trainings. I'm loving that. Let's keep going
Yeah,
on the
it's been
list.
good. It's been really good. It's been really good. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Another one is for actual code generation now. So we looked at so far, we've talked about code comprehension.
Hmm.
Code, yeah, I got
We've got
there's
the
some AI
bubbles that
going
come
on
up.
right
Yeah.
there. I got to watch because sometimes there's fireworks and stuff ends up showing up coming out of my ears. Um, code comprehension, code comparison or debugging, right? And now what about code generation? So how can we do code generation right out of the box?
Hmm.
The most natural, closest to traditional languages, non-scripting languages, is the custom function, the calculation engine in
Hmm.
FileMaker.
Hmm.
So one of the things that we've had really good success with is basically generating custom functions or augmenting big, huge custom
Hmm.
functions
Hmm.
that have lots of features. We have one of our custom functions generates, it takes care of all kinds of scripts and privileges and sorry, privilege. It's an authorization module called
Hmm.
ham, and it takes care of a whole bunch of nested hierarchical privilege sets. And so
Interesting.
how do you manage that, right? And
Hmm.
it folds it, and that's a whole other talk. And we every now and then we need to make a change to that, right? So it's like, oh, I don't want to have to read all of this thing, figure this thing
Yeah.
out, how it's going to work. So we paste that in, and then we say, okay, I want to make this change. And one of the things we've had really good luck with, it's better now, but a year ago, the knowledge of the GPTs to FileMaker's calculation engine wasn't 100%. It was maybe 98%, 95%. You get a random.
I'm gonna go south of there.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It would
So here's how
invent
you can
things.
do
It
it.
would be really difficult. I had no idea at all how to do while. There
Yeah.
was yeah,
So
anyway.
there's a perfect example. While. So you take while. So what you do is you give it some examples, right? Some few shot examples. We find the most nastiest, biggest, look through our custom functions and find ones where while works. And I say, here's how you use while. Check out the syntax,
Hmm.
right? And we paste two or three of those in, and then we paste our actual function in, and now you get really, really good results. And there's no special
Yeah.
training. There's no tuning that you need in there. And it works pretty much out of the box. And if you do spot something, you just have to say, hey, you really need a semicolon on a list, or
Yeah.
you can't have a trailing comma on a list in FileMaker, trailing semicolon, sorry. And then it gets it right away.
Hmm.
So that is one of the easiest low-hanging things. If you're trying to make some calculation, and especially for a lot of developers, I've been really fortunate. I've had the opportunity to work, and this sounds like an exaggeration, but almost 500 developers one-on-one now. And it's because everybody we onboard, I usually onboard
Hmm.
personal to our platform.
Yeah, you do. It's
A
amazing.
lot of them don't use custom functions.
Rightly.
It's amazing, like how many people don't. And they're so powerful, as you know, right? They're crazy powerful. So
Yeah, I was making a joke because I don't actually teach them that much in my classes. Um, but you're right, they're definitely powerful. I use them. I don't use them heavily. I'm not one of those people who like for every solution I have a set of
yeah,
200 custom functions that call each other in crazy ways. But I don't usually teach them because they're really hard to debug and they're you can't you can't
they were hard to debug, yes.
well they still kind of are because you
It's a
can't
layer
step
of
through it.
abstraction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's an abstraction. So in other words, like if it's a script, you can actually script debugger and you can watch in slow motion and see exactly what spot some particular
Yes.
variable breaks.
Yes.
But you're
Right.
right, with GPT or with some, AI, you can definitely have a much better.
And we don't have really good test frameworks. We have a one for custom functions that when any big custom function, we have a test framework that runs through maybe 50 or 100 tests of different scenarios, missing
Hmm,
arguments, wrong type of
nice.
argument, like long
Yeah.
classes and things like that. And it just runs through them. It's built in FileMaker, and it tests that custom function in a real world scenario. But what I was going to say is with that, if you're running into a problem, let's say you don't normally use custom functions and you're running into a problem, and this might be some really bad advice. You can probably tell me otherwise. It's good advice for me, but it might not, what works for me is not necessarily for everybody else. If you're running into something and you can't really figure out, like, I gotta move this thing around here and I gotta create this shape of data, is to go into take some examples of custom functions. They don't have to be custom functions. They can be
Hmm.
just calculations and have GPT generate that calculation. Don't have it generated from scratch because it'll probably crash and burn. But if you have it generated from some examples, and you can save this, you mentioned using GPTs.
Hmm.
And I'm using the term GPT in a couple different ways, right?
Hmm.
You use it as a setup, which is what it is effectively. I'm using GPT as in the model, Chat GPT, but almost the same thing.
Hmm.
So you have a thread that you keep, and that thread is interaction that you've had in the past with calculation engine. Now I got this really complex problem. I got to swap the letters in a name so that instead of being, Charles, they're interleaved like
Right.
CRSARH, whatever it is. And I want to, it's like, how do I write that? Like, I'm not really a great programmer. How am I going to go about doing that? Right. This is a great place where you can use GPT to help with the calculation engine.
Yeah, definitely.
Script code generation. One of the things, another area, and I don't know if you do this, is I pseudocode everything. When I have to write
Yeah,
something big,
yeah, yeah.
I don't just start writing the let variables, right? And I notice most people do. They want to get to the end result, and you know, um, I find I can't keep it all in my head. My brain context window is just too small. I have to write stuff down in steps. Okay, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this and do
I thought
that.
you had a million token context window, no?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, the only problem is it's taken up with things like what I had for breakfast, and
Yeah. And have you
it's like
fed the
that episode.
dogs?
Exactly. It's like the
Yeah.
episode of Homer Simpson where he's on a trivia show, and then they asked him one more piece of information, and the other piece of information for the $1 million question fell out the other end, and that's what that's like.
Yep. I get that.
So
So pseudocode.
yeah, pseudocode. So pseudocoding and helping to pseudocode, not even write the code, but just say, how
Hmm.
do we walk through the logical purpose of this? That's another great area where you can use
Yeah,
LLMs.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like before LLMs, what I would have done is kind of go into a script and just write comments. And then the second pass, I would put in basically the script steps, but with no configuration. It's like at this particular point, I need to do it fine. I need to get some data. So I'd say, go to this layout, go to find mode, set a field, put a comment. I'm looking for blah. Then I get the output of that set variable, and then like I have another block loop, and then write a comment for what the loop is supposed to do, and just kind of like flesh out the
Yes.
big part of the script. And then actually, that's the scaffolding. Then I actually start kind of building the details into that script. Get the hello world working first, and then build error trap. That's the approach I take, and that's the approach I teach.
It's
But I
interesting.
think that gets a ton better. I think with pseudocode, I think you have a whole nother.
Well, I think I kind of have to. I put the comments in, but I'll start a loop.
Mhm.
I'll actually make sure I put an exit on the loop because if you ever run that and leave that there, you just bombed your server if it's running on server. If you haven't like done the exit step, so I'll put a forced exit at the end of the loop right away, just
Yeah,
while I'm developing.
just like a
That's more
straight
of
up
a
exit loop if true kind of a thing.
yeah, exactly. Just while it's there, because otherwise that thing is it's basically it's a bomb, right? And and then your brain dumps all the context when you have to reboot
Hmm.
FileMaker. But do you when oh, sorry, just going back again. So I'll tend to do the same thing. I'll put the loops and I'll put maybe an if, and then I'll just put a comment inside the if what the condition is.
Yeah.
Check for this or something
Yep.
like that.
Yep. Yep.
When you're filling that stuff out, do you generally this is a little bit off topic, but when you're building a loop, when do you put the exit condition? How quick do you code that in? Right.
Hmm.
I usually branch at the top almost all the time for most loops, unless you want it to run once. But do you go about strategy wise? I'm going to start building all this and all the exit conditions, and then I'll put the business in, or do I go and put all the business and then build stuff around it? Like, is there a strategy
Interesting.
that you found that works well?
Yeah, there is. The one that I use is it's kind of similar to the single pass loop. There's a lot of people who really like the single pass loop that treats it. I don't. The basic problem that it solves is, and the extra features that it has, it's not necessarily one that I agree with. So I basically think of a script as sort of two halves. The top half is the part where things are where all the tests and setup and things happen. And at which point, at anything that fails, you can have an exit script, exit script, exit script. And then
Yeah.
there's a line at which there is no exiting. So there's a line below which the script has to finish.
Yes.
And so it can't halt in the middle or whatever. And then all of the tests and all the conditions to check stuff happens above that. Of course, if there's, you could still have an error condition in there or something like that. But basically, there's, below that line, here's the actual business logic. This is the thing that does stuff. And we know that it has the right information and we know it can write to the output. And then as it runs, if it comes up with errors, it writes to a log and, shows it at the end. But anyway, that's kind of how we think about it.
Right.
And so
So
I
I
do
think
have a
that's
lot of places at the top, like, if there's missing a variable, show custom dialog blah exit script. I don't know. Is that what you're asking?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just, and the reason I ask that is because when we onboard people, I usually don't show them. We always use the
Single pass loop.
single pass loops
It has some other
system,
benefits. It's true. It just seems weird.
right? It
Yeah.
just makes it clean and it stops your code from getting super wide, with indents and things like that.
Hmm.
But when I onboard people, I'm basically quite often training people to do certain things as well. And I would love to find a way that I could convey certain concepts really, really easy to them. And so that's why I'm thinking. I mean,
Hmm.
maybe even it might be a real good use for a custom actual GPT
Hmm.
to say, hey, here's my code. Help me pseudocode it, and as a pseudocoder, if you
Hmm.
will. So. Cool. Do you use folders at all in with what is your daily driver
Yes.
for
So,
LLMs
okay.
first of
So
all?
here's another thing. So I'm definitely, like you, I think I use ChatGPT as my main daily one. First of all, I have to say this. A custom GPT is the absolute only way to go.
Okay.
You cannot expect to A, single shot anything out of ChatGPT, uh, and B, get something out, even if you have a long kind of a thread or conversation, it still is just not going to have the context.
Hmm.
So I've spent a whole bunch of time, and I'm going to actually share it publicly, making a GPT like a FileMaker expert GPT. And in it, I have defined with a really long, and detailed prompt and information what the coding standards are, what sources to go look for. Like, if you're going to go look for information, go to the Reliant blog, you know,
Hmm.
to go to these specific blogs and avoid these other ones because basically these are the best sources for truth. I've uploaded documents into it, like this is the actual list of real functions. Don't invent anything that's not on this list. So
Hmm.
something like that I think is key because otherwise it's really difficult and it will invent things and give you code back that's not FileMaker code, it's something else. So that's one thing. But in a folder, when you make a new chat in a folder, it cannot use a custom GPT.
Hmm.
And the folder itself cannot have any of the custom, it doesn't have the feature in ChatGPT to be able to have any of that customization, like a set of documents or prompts. However, if you start one and then you have a long thread with it, you can then move it into the folder so that your whole window isn't polluted with a bunch of stuff. Because kind of the main problem I have is you have all these many conversations on different topics, and having project folders greatly solves that,
Right.
so that you can see them all together. Um, so that's basically my way of doing it. Is yours similar, different?
No, yeah, yours is better. Because I don't bother to, I'm too lazy. I don't bother to make a GPT, and I think that's a great idea.
Just use the one.
Um,
I'll share mine with you. You'll like it.
the majority, yeah, please do. The majority of coding I do is actually not purely in FileMaker. It tends
Mm-hmm.
to be more
Hmm.
JavaScript heavy,
Of
about
course.
70% of my code there, maybe a little bit even more. So, so for that, I don't really need to do that because there's just so much
True.
knowledge in the ether.
Yep.
But I think that's a great idea, and I think that'd be really worth it for us to do that, and then we can say here are some principles and some concepts of how we generally handle JSON. We do a ton of JSON
Hmm.
manipulation and things like that, talking to the web. So that's a great idea. The other another this is an experiment. but it's kind of interesting, I think. So we use a tool called UILicious
Hmm.
for user testing. And
Never
what
heard of
it
it.
does is it basically, yeah, it's a company, I think they're in the Philippines or something like that. It's a, there's a number of these types of companies. And basically what they do is they do end-to-end UI testing. So they'll go to your, say, let's say you have a marketing website and you want to make sure that your contact email is correct or on the site and your sign up form and your,
Hmm.
book a demo and all of these things are working. So it'll go and visit your site. It'll spin up a little virtual browser and visit your site, click the buttons, and you write it in a pseudo, it's a JavaScript technically under the
Hmm.
hood, but you write it in this pseudo kind of language. It'll say I dot Ken dot C my email.
Hmm.
And I click sign up now button and I
Hmm.
see payment form, so on. Well, you can do all of that with an agent now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you can say to the agent, go test my site, write a set of test docs as you see the site, and have it produce these a set of tests that you can use to the agent next time
Hmm.
of all the things that you need to test, so you can get it started and automate that testing. I haven't tried this with WebDirect, but I would imagine it should. I'm not sure if WebDirect should. It should
Yeah.
actually. It should be compatible,
I've tried it
right?
with WebDirect and also with FileMaker because there's a way to spin up an instance that you
Right.
can install FileMaker. Well, not through you. You can do it
Mhm.
with a different provider that I've used, which I'm not sure if they taken away. Anyway, I've tried that where you actually spin up a virtual Windows computer,
Right.
uh, install FileMaker on it, open up your application, and have it do testing and work and stuff like that. But I think
Interesting. So
WebDirect
it's
would be a better
computer
way to do
use.
it. The
Yeah.
virtual instance that you get with OpenAI is not Windows. It's actually a Linux with a standard browser.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because they may have some compatibility there, but the browser should be fully compatible, I would
Yep.
think, depending on what framework it's built on. So it shouldn't be too much of a problem. But that's kind of an interesting idea because for somebody who's, you have multi-stage, not everybody in our community uses development and maybe a staging or test environment plus a production environment, but
Yeah.
a lot of people do. A fair number of people do now. And you can, for the most part, write a very simple, just turn on WebDirect, even if you never use it in your
Hmm.
app,
Hmm.
turn it on. And there's going to be some quirks because we know that it's not, there's 95% or whatever the number is compatibility with almost everything.
Hmm.
But at least for the sake of testing, you don't care if stuff that buttons don't line up. But for the sake of testing certain things and workflows, you
Hmm.
can actually have the agent do that right now. So that's kind of a cool, super low-hanging fruit. Again, all of these things we mentioned, nothing takes any coding to make it work, to make it happen so far. They're all just tools
Yeah.
to help the average developer.
I, I want to
Mhm.
take. Let's keep working through your list, but I want to talk about some of the client-facing things that are low-hanging fruit that we looked at on the beginning and intermediate, you know, and the advanced stuff for ideas that you've come across. Uh,
Yeah.
I
So
think you and I are on the same mission, basically. We're basically we've found that this is super useful, and we're trying to find ways that customers can adopt it in really small bites.
sure. Well, one of the ones where I can tell you some projects that we've done. We do consulting as well. About 50% of our business is consulting,
Hmm.
but it's related to our own stuff. And one of the projects that we've recently done is a document archive. This is a document of an archive of photos, PDFs,
Hmm.
some video files. There's about 8,000 of these documents, and it's really hard to find that spot in the video where the person was talking about X. And so what we've used or what we've done is we've done a hybrid type system where we have a traditional search and there's a field that we can search on for keywords and things
Hmm.
like that. Exactly what you do in FileMaker because it is a FileMaker app. And then what we've done is we've started to use FileMaker's internal semantic search. And
Hmm.
this is sort of our journey on this one that'll share because some people might relate to that. We basically took these documents, we sent the document off to an LLM to scrape the data off of it. So one of the things in the past is you'd have to, you'd have to use something like AWS Textract, I think it's called.
Hmm.
You'd have to use a service like that to pull the data out of
From a
certain
PDF or
documents.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
For the most part, lots of images and things, not so much the video and the audio. Those ones you have to use separate services for a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bit
Yeah. I was
still.
going to say.
But the other ones, just send it off. You say with the prompt that says, scrape all the data, find all the keywords, find the points of interest and things
Hmm.
like that, and put it back. I'm going to use it for semantic search, and it comes back. Then we took that information and we embedded that. And one of the things is when you do embed things, you do lose some resolution on the data. You're embedding some of the meaning, but you're taking this big document effectively of knowledge, and you're putting it down into a smaller piece. So
Yeah,
there's
depending
there's
on the
some loss.
size, right? Yeah, so
Yeah,
the embedding is a fixed size. So if you embed a word or a name, it's going to greatly expand it, and if you embed
exactly.
a 400-page document, it's going to greatly compress it, right?
And that's what we found. We found, okay, well, it's kind of like not the greatest that way, right? So we ended up
Yeah, you got to chunk it.
exactly. So the question is, okay, now you have to build your own internal chunking to your own system. How are you going to do that, and so on. So
Pretty easy with FileMaker 25.5, the new. Anyway,
yeah,
I
that's
won't.
so if you're using the LLMs, the LLM service, right? So what we ended up doing is we
No, there's a script step in FileMaker 2025 that can directly read a PDF and get the text out of it
right.
without an LLM call.
Oh, for the scraping, yeah. But
Yeah,
I'm talking about the semantic search afterwards, though,
right. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
right? So
Hmm.
for that one there, um, for that, what we ended up doing is we ended up actually using ChatGPT's vector store.
Hmm.
Super easy to use. You can just push a document up to it. It embeds it instantly. It's effectively free. You use the tokens to access. You're charged on the tokens accessing that data, and I think it's like 10 cents a gigabyte after a certain amount, something like
Yeah.
that.
I
But
didn't actually
relatively
find that to be super easy, so I would love to kind of go through that with you.
sure, yeah.
I found it like
Um,
there's a few steps in that process that I'm like, wow, how do I do this part now? you know.
yeah,
Anyway,
well, it's a curl request with the document, and then you have to attach the document in that curl and then push it up there. One of the things we do is if you are doing this, is you might end up with a bunch of garbage up there, and you don't want to go into their panel and try to delete it. It's really
well,
hard.
the second part of it is you have to be able to do a call, right? Because it's now in their space, and you have to use it's an assistant. I'm not sure if you're using the assistant part or what other model, what other like
Yeah,
product that you're
so
using
the there's a
to
separate
query it.
API. Yeah, there's a separate API for doing that query,
Hmm.
and in our case, you can just call it directly. In our case, we built tools. We built generic tools into Better Forms because we have a lot of users,
Hmm.
hundreds of users that have different app cases. So we built in a provider agnostic vector search. So sorry, so if I'm using, for example, Gemini,
Hmm.
which doesn't have that ability, just GPT, I think the last time I checked anyway
Hmm.
does, or if I'm using Anthropic's models, those models can actually access the GPT vector store
Hmm.
directly without coming back into your system. So we've built some endpoints, and then you can just by changing the model and the provider as an argument,
Yeah.
call all three of these major providers, frontier providers, and switch up models on the fly, even
Hmm.
by call. And we did that because we do a lot of dog fooding. We did that because we needed it for our own internal AI as
Hmm.
well. So that's one of the things. But you can just absolutely just do an insert from URL call to search for that. Now, if you're using the assistance API, then you can attach that vector store to the assistance API.
Yeah, and then you can have a conversation with it. Like
Exactly.
you can get results back, and if you don't like it, you can say, "Well, that's not what I meant. I want this, or I wanted this." And whereas other ways to do it, right, this is kind of what I would call RAG, right? The easiest possible way
Hmm.
to do real RAG, not pseudo RAG, is kind of what well, my mission, honestly, has been to try to find something that I can really easily give to students that they could use without having to do a several hour long class for that. And I so far haven't found anything that's easy enough to say, here's a demo file that works. There's hardly anything that you have to do that's difficult.
Right.
Wait, let's talk about
Right.
that later.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just
Yeah.
going back to one thing that you said. You said pseudo rag. You mean like record retrieval? Augmented generation. So no, it's not. There's no augmented. It's just record retrieval. Is that the pseudo part that you meant? Like when you
Well, I'm trying to think of an example because you can. Um, I'm trying to think, remember. There's a way that you can do it where you can basically what I think of as RAG is I think of it as a generative call against embedded data. And
Mhm.
so it's a method to have a generative call against a huge amount of data, which is otherwise not possible to do. Right. So in other words, if you say, you know, take a look at these 10,000 invoices and show me the ones that have a really anomalous mix of products, or
Mhm.
you know, find the ones that are most likely to be in error, or something like that, or even just like a basic report. You know, so take this list of invoices for 2 years, and give me the top 10 products total and how each of those products sales have changed over time. That's like, you know, that's easy to visualize, and you can't
Yeah.
do it with any of the basic tools because you can't have an API call send that much data,
Yeah. Exactly.
and you can't use semantic search to do that. So you really have to have a generative call with a simple question like that with a gigantic amount of data. And that's something you can do if you use the assistant feature or some of the other features.
That's right.
Um, but I don't believe that you can actually do an API call uh, against FileMaker's RAG data. Even so, FileMaker can actually store all that stuff, but you can't actually do a query against it,
Right.
which you can do if the data is outside of FileMaker, which I don't kind of fully understand why, but anyway, that's the case.
Yeah. And then maybe that'll change.
Yeah.
Um, that's one of the most recent projects. So what we did is
Hmm.
we pushed all the data up to vector store. We query against that, and then we
Hmm.
have two modes. The search response screen has two settings. You have
Hmm.
basically a chat type interface and then a retrieval of documents. So one way it produces like a Google type of result
Yeah.
with a summary based on my information I request. I'm really interested in all this stuff to do with tall building architecture. And then it'll say, here's a document, and this document has tall building architecture because of this. So
Right.
each subparagraph, even though it's a directory or an index, I guess it
Hmm.
is, those can all have a generated blurbs underneath, so I can and then I can click into that and follow that
Yeah.
document, pull it up and stuff. Or the chat one is more the result is, and it's really just the difference between these two. The chat one is the first one, it's a single line chat, and the prompt says return it in this format. The second one, the chat interactive one is more chat style, left style, right style
Hmm.
UI. And you can see the documents. It'll show the pictures of the documents, put them embed the videos and everything right in line.
Hmm.
So we have this multimedia type interface. Which brings me to another thing. It's a little bit more intermediate kind of tip
Hmm.
is prompt storage and prompt management and evals and that type of thing. I noticed somebody sharing. I was at a meetup and they had the prompt inside an insert text,
Yeah.
right? And I
That's
thought, wow, that's
that's the way
like
to do it.
I think that's where it was, right? And it
Yeah,
was like,
for
okay,
sure.
this is really, really hard,
Yeah, insert
right?
text is great compared to set variable, because you can just paste it in. You can have whatever kind of formatting you want in it. Uh, yeah, it's definitely. And then if you need to insert data into it, then you can do a set variable with the variable that has the text. Anyway, yeah, I'm all about that.
So I'm not a fan of that, though, to be honest with you. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of that. Like I use insert text for hard coded a bunch of JavaScript or something like that's going to run in a web viewer. And I want to share something here on my screen here, just
Yeah,
quick.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'll show you the tool that we have for managing, for prompt managing here. And I'll show you why we use this.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
one of the things
prompt management as actually a record in a table, I think would be ideal.
I agree, totally
Um,
agree. So this is Clarigent. It's just an internal tool that we have. And these are effectively top level prompts or first prompt that you would run to do something.
mhm.
Right. But one of the things we find is we gotta manage these things. You have to manage the versions of them. You make changes. It's like it's finicky, right?
Mhm.
Especially something significantly complex. Like I'll just show you here. This is this is a prompt here. And it's a fairly lengthy prompt. This is
Hmm.
the top level of it. This is only half of our system prompt for our internal AI assistant, and somebody's probably can
Yeah, this
grab
is
this off.
great. So the people who are listening, there's like this looks like, I don't know, 10 pages and broken into sections. Like here's the code, here's the elements, these are the JavaScript sessions that you do, use these models, and then a bunch of sample code in it, right? And at the beginning, it's like, this is what you are, these are the things you reference, this is the schema, this is the guideline. Yeah, it's great.
Exactly. And
The
because
more
they're
the more experience you get using AI, the longer and more detailed prompts you use. It's a total clear.
It's interesting.
Uh,
GPT-5, we actually found some of the prompts went down. Less prompting has actually been better.
really? Huh.
Yeah, and they actually in their press release doc on how to tune things,
Hmm.
they'll simplify some of the things because we used to have a lot of I'll call it guide or guardrail type prompts, like certain edge cases. Always do this, never do that. All these weird edge cases, and if the person is talking about ABC, don't mention D,
Right.
right? And all these weird business rules. And we had to bake those all in. Now
Hmm.
we can just say a little bit more. We can say clearly, just give them what they need. I'm simplifying it and dumbing
Yeah,
it down a bit,
exactly.
but they don't have all of these little things that coddle the prompt as it goes along. And with 5 and 4.1 as well, and all the other newer models,
Hmm.
they are much better at instruction following because the prompts, the GPTs are definitely being used for more agentic type workflows.
Hmm.
So we use this as a prompt, and now we can version these things.
So
We
this is your
convert,
system prompt. Yeah, you're versioning
yeah,
system prompts. You've got checkboxes for what can it do? Can it do streaming? Can it do whatever non-blocking
exactly.
is?
And the model, we can pick the model, what
Ah,
models that we
nice.
have
Damn.
here.
Yeah, yeah,
If a
yeah.
new model comes out, we have a section for the models. So here's the models. I can't flash any of these because it'll show some of their API keys here.
Right.
We also have a sub prompts, and these are all sub prompts for our things. And I'll give you an example of one. Is these are again are versioned, right?
Hmm.
So that means I can easily change the version, and I can experiment, and I can branch in FileMaker. I can branch in the code here. There's one kind of cool thing I do want to show you,
Hmm.
and this is not this is just a bunch of prompting, but I want to just find something just to see if I can find one in here. All right, this guy here. So just for people who can't see,
Named.
I have a prompt, and in the prompt I have mustache braces or curly braces,
Hmm.
kind of like FileMaker's double angle brace merge tags for layout objects.
Square braces. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, for layout objects. Yeah.
angle ones there. And I just changed their size here. And basically inside that it says dollar and then a variable name, model default,
Hmm.
right? And it's a dollar, and that dollar is an actual FileMaker variable,
Yep.
right? So the variable is evaluated. The contents of this, the stuff inside the curly braces, is evaluated on the fly. So we have a custom function. If you go to the Delfs Engineering GitHub, you can find the custom function. It's called process mustache template. It was GPT written,
Okay.
something like that. But what it does is allows me to put in conditional brackets in there. And this is now getting into a little bit more advanced prompt management.
Hmm.
Let me go to one that you can actually see that. And let me find one here that says dev. You can find,
So these are so the prompt management. The way you've got it set it up here, it seems like it would actually be useful not only for you internally to develop, but actually for a deployment for a customer.
it is. What it means is now you can dynamically put different types of data. And this is a whole conversation. I'm trying to find a good one in here, if I can. Let me just find developer.
I've found that the best way to build these prompts is there's a lot of recursive conversation with GPT, like,
Yes.
I use this prompt, but the result I got was this. How do I change the prompt to get a better result? And you kind of you rinse repeat that structure to get a better prompt.
I'm trying to find, and I found, sorry about this. Let me just find one more. I just want to show you this one because it is kind of bug P. I can't seem to find it. We have this custom function that we use for merging. It can
Hmm.
do conditionals. And because it's an evaluation, it can actually look up data. So we could say, based on this ID, go using calling other sub custom functions for SQL search and things. You can fetch data and dynamically merge data in. And the conditional stuff is when I'm using our AI assistant, I want to be able to query that AI assistant outside of its its guidelines. So we have a prompt, and it's in here somewhere. It really is, and it basically says if developer mode, and that's a variable that runs when it executes. If developer mode, use this prompt, add this prompt into the prompt, and otherwise it doesn't add it in at all. So in the past, before using like these little custom functions to help, we would have to add that in there, and that goes with every call with every person, and now you can really tailor the chunks of the prompts. So I think a really low-hanging fruit, if you're starting to build something and you have two or three different prompts that almost do the same thing with slightly different changes, throw those into a table called, prompts,
Hmm.
and fetch that data. And now you can change that and you can experiment. And that brings up to the other thing with evaluations. Like, how do you judge? And this is a really hard one. How do you judge how well an AI assistant works or whatever it's doing? You can kind of look and it looks all
Hmm.
right, but you don't get the edge cases. And especially if your prompt is really complex, like how do you stop it from how do you notice actually and make that issue surface better?
Yep.
So this is actually something that is, depending what you're doing in FileMaker, is really easy. Is basically you do the call, you get the result, and you have a whole table. I don't have an
Hmm.
example here
Yeah, log the result.
of that. You log the result,
Hmm.
and you have preset conditions, right? So here's my test case. This is the information that goes into the prompt,
Hmm.
or into the arguments that go into the prompt. We'll call it the context.
Hmm.
You run it. This is the result. And then you can actually, if you want, you can use AI to look at that result and say, nah, does it really meet the conditions? It
Yep.
should do this because it will change a little bit, right? It's not deterministic there. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've actually done something very similar. So basically, a table that has prompts that you can manage, version, etc., and then a table that has results. So user does a prompt, whatever, internally or however they do it. It calls a specific system prompt and does some stuff. It takes the user prompt as well, makes the call, and then gets the result back, which is text. And
exactly.
then can log that, and then you can do a comparison later because now you've got in your log, you've got here's the system prompt, here's the user prompt, here's the result, and then you're going to have a big table of them, which you can then do comparisons and evaluate quality, and it basically a human can look at it and say, hey, how what are we missing here?
Exactly.
What follow up things did the user doing because they're not getting the result they want? Yeah. Anyway, so I think that's what I think it's what you're
Yeah,
getting
and
at as
that's
well.
exactly what we do. We have a list. We have it in Notion. Um, and it's a list of test conditions. When the user asks for something, it should do this, and then the tester, our QA person, Alex, he can go in and say, okay, it's actually there's a deficiency here.
Hmm.
The user asked to make this change, but it didn't quite make this a change. And we find all those edge cases. We don't do crazy big numerical evaluations in the sense of looking at how accurate that is. That's better more for a semantic search. This is more for flexibility
Hmm.
because we're using the AI for that. So that's how we manage prompts. And the takeaway there, I would say, is have something that you can play around with versions of your prompts so you can dial them in because there is quite an art. They used to call it prompt engineering. They used to, like last year.
They
And
don't
now the
still.
big buzzword is context engineering.
Oh,
But the
okay.
prompt engineering is still a really important thing. And there's two types of context engineering. The prompt engineering is one thing, just getting the right wording, the right
Hmm.
phraseology, the structures, like you mentioned, having that structure, some frameworks for that, basically
Yeah.
it's like who you are, what you want to
Goals,
do.
limits,
So
information.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Context.
and there's
Yeah,
some
actually,
others.
Chris and I talked specifically about that on a recent episode.
And those work really well, those structures. I think they're more for people because you can interleave a lot of that stuff and it works just the same.
Hmm.
Um, there's also been some talk on using XML type tags around stuff. You
Hmm.
noticed mine was all Markdown.
Hmm.
Markdown is like
I saw that.
for the other people who didn't see is a method for marking bold and italics and
Hmm.
things like that with asterisks and hashtags.
It's
And
supported in Clara Studio. I wish it was supported in FileMaker
Markdown,
directly. Yeah, like
it's
directly in a
handy.
text
Right?
field, it would be so
Yeah.
great.
That's absolutely. The nice thing, is from my perspective, because I work in the web world, is get as CSS, and you can take all of that stuff out of FileMaker and just render it fine.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
not so bad. And we have lots of text editors, so we can keep it as that and push it back into
yeah.
FileMaker in a similar fashion as a web viewer. Um, so where was I saying? Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. Oh, well, it's okay. We'll go on to the next one.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to take a look at your list. When we were looking at it before we started recording, there was some other things that I thought were pretty exciting that were customer facing. So I'd love to just kind of go back and look at this. So you've got some agentic stuff coming, prompt storage and editing. We just talked about that. Um,
Conditional prompting I mentioned. This is a real
what's
killer.
whimsical on context agents and streaming?
Oh, oh, this is a little more complex. So one of the things we do is, I'm just going to pull up a drawing here.
Another question I totally wanted to ask there on local models. We'll come to that next.
So this is one of the things. If you are building some kind of thing that chats back and forth a lot,
Hmm.
right? It's going through a whole bunch of messages, and in ChatGPT we have message on the side there. This is how we started. We started giving you this a system prompt, which is the personality, if you will. You're this, you're going to do
Right.
this. These are the main things. That doesn't matter where you are in the app. But as you move around your FileMaker application, if you do have some kind of a chat window open, as you move around, you want to tell the LLM that, hey, I'm on the invoices page. This is what you should be doing here. These are the kinds of things you could do here if it's
Right.
interacting with that, depending on how big of a system you've built here. So we've kind of skipped building that system. So in this case, you have the system prompt, you have the context prompt. This is where you are, plus all your data. And this is what we did. We took all of the active record, if you will, and then we put the message, send that message, and then the user's most recent message. Then OpenAI and some of the other companies introduced prompt caching so they can do a little bit of caching. So then we modified this and we have the system agent at the front. That never changes, right? It doesn't have any variables in it. So it doesn't change at all. The messages and then our context prompt would go at the end. So you think of this as a vertical stack
Well,
of,
let's pause for a second on prompt
yeah,
caching. Does that mean that if you do two or three prompts in a row as individual API calls, that they actually can reference the previous ones? Is that is it a checkbox or
yeah.
something? How
So
do you?
if you think about how the LLM works,
Hmm.
it starts from the beginning of, you say hello. So it looks at well,
Hmm.
it tokenizes it. So it's looking at hellos can be tokenized as one word. So it's taking hello and it says, what's the next probable token to go after that? So it has to do a bunch of computation to get that next token.
Sure.
And then it says, hello, how can I help you? And it renders that. And it keeps reflecting back to the H, to the E, to the L. Well,
Right.
they're by tokens. They're not really by H to the L, right? And it's reflecting to that sentence. Now, when I have another thing, my next sentence is, I want to write a story. It has to go back to the hello, and then it also has to go back to the what can I help you with?
Hmm.
That's its message. And it keeps reflecting back and forth. Well, that's a lot of computational energy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
effort
yeah.
that's
So like
taken
if you're
back.
basically in a what you don't really know is happening is when you're just in a regular conversation. Every single request that you send is sending the complete history of the requests and responses back to the model. So it has all that in its memory. But when you make an API call, it does not. That each API call is completely independent of the one that you just did before it. So caching is
Yeah, but they still, the nice thing is they turned on or enabled prompt caching right for everybody. So, and you can go to your OpenAI playground
so as an API. Are you talking
dashboard,
API calls here? Or are you talking?
API calls, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and they'll automatically cache. So what they do is they say, "Hey, you've already asked. We already have in our memory for your account. We already have all the computation from the
Hmm.
hello and
Got it,
then
got
the
it, got it.
next message, how can I help you? I don't need to compute all the way up to that point again. I can just continue from there forward because nothing's changed there's no generative part behind that. So nothing's changed. So you can cache this stuff. So by organizing the thing that changes, the data that changes and putting that data that changes at the end of your message chain, we'll call it, or
Yeah.
message array, you reduce the chance of breaking that cache. If I put a variable at the very beginning in my system prompt and I say this is the time and the date, for example,
Hmm.
right? That means every time I send a message, I'm busting my cache each time because it's changing. I want to keep as ephemeral as possible the data from my message history, if you will, to never change every time I send it. And then OpenAI, or I'm using them as an example,
Hmm.
will cache that, right? And you can get metrics back as well on the performance of that. And that's what we did. We moved this around, and right away, as soon as we did that, we ended up with fairly high levels of cache tokens. Depending on the model that you're using, the cache tokens are either half price, a quarter of the price, a tenth of the price sometimes. It just depends on the model and how
Hmm.
efficient, I guess, that internally it is, how beneficial it is to them. But using a model like 4.1 to 4.1 mini or
Hmm.
nano, I think
Hmm.
it's a half and a quarter price or something like that. So you save quite a bit if you're sending a lot of stuff. Honestly, though, I noticed when I was at a meetup just recently, one of the big costs was how much does it cost? How much does it cost? How much does it cost? They were so hung up on the cost of the LLM, not realizing its benefit. And this
It's also just
particular,
stupidly inexpensive. I mean,
it is. It's just
anyway,
crazy, right? It's kind of like when the data API came out in FileMaker. Everybody asked, "Well, it's monetized, so I don't want to use it."
right.
And then it's like, "Oh, actually, I'm hardly using it. Nobody's,
Yeah.
out of
Like
400 or
back when it was
300 apps or something."
restricted or whatever, and they charged for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've never
Now,
seen anybody
now
go
the
over it.
limits are gone. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Good.
So then finally, we've modified that. We went through this kind of journey of versions of our AI assistant, and we started adding a little bit of compression in here. So that means you take all of these messages, and we don't really want to start fresh each time.
Hmm.
When you're using GPT, you don't want to start right away because it knows all of that stuff. I've had to put that effort in, that
Well, it
energy in.
compresses it too automatically. But yeah.
Yeah, so we added basically the ability to do compression. And then finally, we added a couple more is when you're calling tools and things like that. We haven't really talked about it. Maybe another time we can do that more.
Hmm.
But when you're calling tools, you don't want to store the results of that tool. You mentioned earlier on, it's like if I have to get the results of a find, there could be 100 records that come back, and I'm going to have to throttle that somehow, or reduce it down to 20 records and tell the agent that there's more if you need them. And I don't want to pass that all that data every time I do a call. So instead, and this is what we're working on now. We do a little bit more advanced technique where we say, this is the summary of the data that came back. If you need it, I still have it to the model. And then the model says, oh, okay, give me that fragment or that chunk that you had because I need to reference it again. The other thing we do as well is we send in a locator. Where are you in the app? Right? Are you on your invoices page? Are you in your contacts page? This is if you have a chat window, right?
Hmm.
Where are you in there? And by sending a little bit and say the user, in our case, it's the user has changed from one area, they've changed to the styling page or they've changed to the actions page. By doing that, it gives the LLM some contextual break and it says, oh, okay, now they're working on something else. And it's
Hmm.
just a hint. It's just a hint to it. So that's one of the
Yeah.
things,
I like it.
another little trip or trick, I should say. The biggest one is this one here, though. Put the system prompt at the beginning, the main stuff that never changes.
Hmm.
Put the record related stuff, merge that in the very last message, and you'll almost instantly save half your LLM costs.
Hmm. Good. Yep. Good to know. Okay, we're kind of drawing on
Yeah.
time, but I saw one little thing in there that said use case for local models. Is there a valid one?
Okay, let's talk about that. So,
Yeah, because
which side do you want to argue on?
well, here's my starting position. I am a huge fan of hosting FileMaker servers on AWS. And on an AWS server, you'd get a server with 4 gigs of RAM or something like that. Every
Mhm.
single step up you go, medium, large, extra large, whatever, doubles the price and doubles the RAM. And all of the instances you get are CPU based, not GPU based.
GPU based.
So if you want to use the feature in FileMaker to build a FileMaker server that uses the internal ability, all the documents say do not do that on your main FileMaker server, rightly.
Yeah, yeah.
B, they basically all say you have to kind of start with a model that's like, start with a server that's 32 or 64 gigs of RAM
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and has GPUs. So now you're
So much.
talking about a FileMaker server that costs you $50 a month and an AI server that costs you 1,000 a month.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just not, instead of just making an API call, basically. So there has to be another way to do that, where you can have it hosted and it's not insane.
And
What's your
I
what's your thought?
res
What are your thoughts?
yeah, I respect. Okay, so the argument for it is, well, I
Privacy.
need security,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So you took that side, so I'll take the other side for a little bit, but I'm in your camp, so don't worry. Um, so I got to argue security, and I think that's a comfort thing. Like, I think if
Yeah,
any of these
trust.
LLM companies blew out your data, that would be the end of the company in
I
terms of,
totally agree. It's
like, that
not a
would be so
yeah.
devastating for
There's
them.
no way they're going to be able to hide that.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
And, that would be I would never use them again, right? And it's just like my bank. If my bank lost money, I wouldn't use that bank anymore. So we build up a level of trust there.
Hmm.
I think if it was a real issue, all of these companies, like major companies now they're moving, like in the years ago, we would move faster, FileMaker community. We could custom software, we could build anything, we can do it, I can fix it. I'm a problem solver, blah, blah, blah. Big companies are moving faster with implementing AI than little companies are. That's what it seems like anyway.
Yeah.
And they're comfortable with it. They're okay using these services. So you're telling me you with your company that, does, I don't know, inspections of air conditioners,
Hmm.
you're not comfortable sharing your data with the LLM, yet
Your
these other
bank
major
is.
companies, my bank,
Yeah.
and these companies are doing these other kinds of things. I don't know if the bank is using that because that's a whole different world. I know somebody who works in the IT of a bank department, and it is a bit of a different world. They provision the servers for 4 years out because they have to make sure that the factories, and there's a lot of stuff that
Right.
jumps in there. But almost every other company is comfortable with that. So I could argue that the security is not necessarily a thing. What about performance? Well, now you mentioned it. You have to have a really relatively beefy machine if you're going to do generation. If you're going to do semantic search, that's a different story, though. There's
Totally.
an argument there. You
Yeah.
you might
Yeah.
be able to have something local, like for the embedding of all your documents
Yeah,
and
not only
stuff.
that, for semantic search, you could do it on a local computer, right? Even if you have a big hosted solution, you could have a Mac Mini with 64 gigs of RAM
Exactly.
and do the embedding kind of an offline thing on
Yeah,
that,
and I think
and
that
then upload it
CPU is
kind of
probably going
everything.
to be the more dominant factor for that one, right? Because you're
Even if
not
it
really,
isn't, a local computer like if you use an AWS instance, it just doesn't have one,
yeah.
but on Mac Mini, it has a really fast GPU, right? And it will use that heavily.
But in fairness, I am sheltered. I would love to hear chat with people over a pint kind of thing and hear how they absolutely had to have their stuff local. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
definitely.
the change in our
I
in
would
and
like
I'm
if
not
we had a
just
conversation with Windacort or some of the people who have
Mhm.
actually, really detailed how to do this. They would have some great use cases of customers who needed it, did it, had
Yeah.
success with it. Yeah, I just think it's a pretty small percentage.
We use a fair bit of resources every month. We use
Yeah, I wonder what's your
about
bill?
about $100, about $100, and it varies.
Yeah,
And it's that's only $100, and
I
that's for
know.
everybody.
I know. I'm laughing because it's just so small. Like in all
Yeah.
my teaching, maybe it's smart, maybe it's not, but a lot of my students, I'm not going to ask them to get an OpenAI account. So I'll
Yeah.
give them a demo file that has my API key. And
Yeah.
so for the
Yeah.
duration of the class while they're playing and learning, they're hitting my API key.
Yeah.
And
Two
I
cents
think
later.
it's 13, 15 a month, something like that. It's just
Yeah.
I don't think I've hit 100 or even
Yeah.
50 a month
It's
yet.
it's
Um,
relatively cheap. And that's
yeah.
the only reason it's that, and it could be a quarter of that, is because it's not worth us to put the effort into optimizing things to make it run cheaper. Unless it's extremely low-hanging fruit,
Hmm.
context and prompt structure,
Yeah.
and diet prompting itself, and for a faster model, cheaper model,
Yeah.
right? Unless it's worth it, we don't even bother. All right.
Yeah.
So we did do some routing internally at one time when images first came out because they were a little bit more expensive. And I think it was four. Four did images, three, four,
To
so one of them,
integrate them, to interpret them, to what?
to interpret and to load
Yeah.
them, upload them.
Yep.
So we did some internal routing. We select a different model if there was an image attached, and you can do things.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even
Hmm.
bother anymore, that kind of stuff, because of that. And just going back just to one final point on the reluctance to change. There was years ago, and you'll remember this. It's like, don't you dare open the FileMaker over a network. Don't you dare open. Then we got comfortable with that. Don't you
Yeah.
dare edit a record, or sorry, edit FileMaker, like scripts and stuff
Yeah.
over a network. We're okay with all of that stuff.
Right.
We've confidence get builds up, right? And we will get more confident with security, and we'll probably have a few
Yeah.
breaches here and there of some stuff. I'm
I
sure that's
mean,
going to
yeah,
hit the
SSL,
news.
TLS, right? Like I feel quite confident going to the Wi-Fi of any hotel, opening up ExpressVPN and looking at my bank balance
Hmm. I think
because
everybody does.
I've got encryption within encryption, right? So
Mhm.
and also I'd say, you know, doing that from a Mac, right? I'm relatively sure. And I still virus check my whole Mac from time, you know.
Yep.
So, and there definitely was a time that you couldn't trust that. And if you, uh, I'm just thinking about in conversations that I've had in my head with Chris and others who are talking about the security. Like if you have a bank and it's an HTTP, not HTTPS, you
Hmm.
make some error like that, and all the horror stories that have can happen and have happened to basically, you know, steal from you. If a hacker really, really, really wants to get your data, they're going to.
Yeah, you're done. I
Yeah.
agree with that. You're absolutely done.
They're going to
There's
be able to socially engineer it, or they're going to do some
yeah,
way, or they're going to, you know, use some sort of a thing where they can, you know, clone your phone. Or
yeah,
I have
yeah.
no
There's
idea if you see in all the sci-fi movies if someone can get close to your phone and actually get the data. I don't know if that exists or not. I kind
that
of
one
doubt
doesn't,
it,
but
but
there are some things that are close to that. Like for example, we used to do a thing called war driving. I'm from an electrical engineering background
mm-hmm. I
originally.
know what that is.
And we look around and look for networks, and you could actually go and if you have a Windows machine, you could see files, right? It was really bad.
Yeah.
Things were terrible.
Yep.
Because it was just obfuscation at the time.
Yep.
There are a lot of devices like the Flipper R1 or whatever it's called, and a whole bunch of other devices and accessories. Basically, it's an Arduino for hackers, and that allows people to do that stuff.
Yeah, like there was one of them that you could buy for $100 years ago. I bought one actually, where you could clone a Wi-Fi network. You could just, you know, bring in your
Mhm.
notebook, plug in this little USB thing. It would read the public network name and whatever its Wi-Fi name was, and rebroadcast it as another version, right? Like airport free
Yeah,
Wi-Fi, airport free Wi-Fi fast or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Oh my
And
God,
then
I used
people would join that. They could join it for free. All the traffic would be routed over the other one, but you'd be making a copy of all of it. And if you use regular HTTP, then they could get a track of everything, all the banks you're going to, all the sites you're going to, but not your passwords unless you don't use HTTPS. If you use VPN, they get nothing, as far as I understand.
yeah.
Um,
So just going back to FileMaker and things and on-site, off-site for I
mhm,
think there is a case for vector search,
mhm,
LLM
mhm.
generation. I don't know, unless you have some crazy fast model that people are typing and it's a type ahead, like type ahead
Mm.
prompting or something like that,
Yeah,
which we
yeah, yeah.
can't do in
Real
FileMaker
time
unless
type
it's in
stuff.
a web viewer anyway. Yeah, we can't do that stuff. I don't really know of a good use case of having that. And the speed, the velocity of the tools that are there, every company, or sorry, every month I get, a newsletter of all these new tools that are available. So it's pretty competitive too. And I don't know, but I'd love to hear that. I'd love to hear it. Maybe.
Yeah, I kind of would too. But I'm kind of in the camp of like the, the the amount of compute that happens and that is available to me for really cheap when I do an API call of any of the endpoints is ungodly, the amount of CPUs they could throw at something for
Oh
a
yeah.
half a second, right?
Yeah.
Or 30 seconds, right? Like one of the deep research things
Lots of
or something.
trees. Lots of trees.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Let's think about that too. Like, I was did a query like one time. I was like, how can it use water? There's no way that it can actually destroy water. It doesn't. Water doesn't disappear. It evaporates and it condenses. Um, you know, and they use water to cool. Like, you know, they put a facility next to a river in an area that's hot. They're using solar to
Hmm.
or river to actually generate electricity, and then they're using the water from the river to cool the CPUs, to cool the data center, right? So it would seem like that's actually kind of neutral,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
it's
I
kind of,
think
but
most of
it's,
the data centers are not too bad that way.
yeah, but
I
it's
think they
actually
have to be.
kind of, but it's actually also kind of not, because they're heating the water, and there's not really an easy
Mm,
way to cool down that water. So the greatly warmed water is going to have an effect
sure.
on the environment. You can't really just put it right back into the river, because that's going to, damage the animal. Anyway, I took a weird path down that a while ago. I'm going to confess one more thing, and then we're going to wrap. For the first time last week, I had a long session where I was trying to solve a problem for a particular client, and I was having a long conversation with AI about it, and I would have been better off not using AI. Rather than
Yes.
using my brain, I was relying on it.
Yes.
And at the end of it, I'm like, this really wasn't that hard. I could have just done the work, kept the variables in my, used my own context window rather than, and it was eye opening. Has that happened to you?
Absolutely. Yes. And I got a little picture here that I brought along. And this is generally my experience. I have literally two and three um, editors open. Most of the time, I'm using AI for
Hmm.
specking out a new feature. So I'll spend probably 2 or 3 days chatting with the AI in my non-meeting times and things
Hmm.
like this
Hmm.
because I'm running a business as well. And I'll build up this document, and then I'll say go. And but before I used to do that, this was my experience. And this is for those who are just listening, it's a series of three pictures like a cartoon. And the first one is a spigot like you'd have in a bathtub filling up a glass of water, but along halfway down the spigot, there's a leak. And that's the program. That's when your program has a bug. And what you had hoped that the AI does is it would mend that leak. It would wrap some kind of mending thing around the
Hmm.
leak, plug the leak, and then the spigot would still work. But this is almost all of my experience almost right away. What it ends up really doing is instead of the spigot filling up a cup and then having the leak go on the ground, the spigot turned the cup into a bowl, and now the bowl catches the leak and the top. Technically, it works, but it's just the wrong way to solve a problem. And sometimes you have to just stop. And I do it quite often. I'll rage vibe code where I'm yelling and screaming and threatening and saying, why aren't you doing this? And I need to
Yeah.
just stop doing that altogether. Use my actual brain. I'm smart enough to solve this problem. I managed to make it so far without using AI. Go back and then use AI to augment what I'm doing and not to replace what I'm doing.
Yep, definitely. There was a study that's been cited a bunch about coders who used AI, and they did a big thing at the end where it showed them to actually they believed that they were actually saving time with it, but when they analyzed their work, they were spending more time with it. It's a really poor study. It was like 8 people. It was for one particular. It's just absolutely garbage, right? It's not data. It's more of an anecdote. And one of my favorite phrases is the plural of anecdote is not data.
Hmm.
So anyway,
Awesome.
this is great. I always love chatting with you. Any other parting shots before we wrap it up? Other
Maybe
than
next
hi,
time we'll
Alexei.
talk about yeah, next time we'll talk about the UI of AI because this is an interesting. I think it's a
Mm.
whole different world, and I'll tell you how I think we're doing AI wrong, everybody. And
Ooh,
it'll be a prediction, but we'll see.
ooh. All right. Well,
So
we'll have to definitely come back in a couple of weeks.
awesome.
Next week, I'm going to be in Italy at the Naples FileMaker Week conference. So anybody who's there, come say hi to me in person. Um, are you going to any of the Europe ones?
I will be at the Engage U. I think
Engage
I'm
you.
going. A
Sweet.
couple of
November.
our two of our team are going to be going. What else were we doing? We're sponsoring Reconnect, but we're not going to Australia.
Mm.
And I didn't realize it so quick is Rome. I was there. I went to last year to sorry,
Yeah.
Rome FileMaker Week,
Yeah.
not
Which is
Naples,
Naples FileMaker Week this
which is
year.
an excellent op. It's still
Yeah.
not too late probably to register, and it's a great time.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's
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 next
really really
week.
good.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's,
So
yeah.
yeah, I
Monday
probably
to
won't be
Monday
going
to
to that one
Sunday.
because I haven't budgeted, set aside time or anything like that for
Yeah,
that.
and it's definitely a good conference. And what I love about that one too is they organize tours and things like that. So not only you're getting the awesome FileMaker knowledge and the good camaraderie and stuff like that, but you're actually really experiencing a city and kind of really and then you having good relationships with the other people who are doing the tour with you. I really
I
like
know I
that.
was just down at the Greenville at Build, Grow, Learn, which is another phenomenal
Mm.
conference that
Yes,
every
yes, yes, yes.
developer who has a company absolutely should be taking part of. And I think Joe Scarpetta is going there.
Yep.
He's going,
Joe Scarpettas, I think, could be in Rome too, or in
yeah, yeah,
Naples. Yeah.
yeah. He was there. He was at Rome last year, and he's going to be at Rome. Sorry, at Naples this year. So you'll
Hmm.
see him there.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, he's a brilliant guy. All right, sweet. Charles, thanks so much for your time.
Awesome, man. Cheers.